This episode of the KrakCast is brought to you by our friends at BigDoor24.pl. It's a new service that not only matches expats with local property experts who speak their language, but it gives you cash-back discounts on successful credit applications. So go to BigDoor24.pl, that's BigDoor24.pl. Find out all the information you need to get the mortgage you want. Again, BigDoor24.pl. Make sure you use the special promo code KrakCast to get a great cash-back offer. And now, on with the show. So last week we had Fat Thursday. Josh, Dave, did you do the donut thing?
Of course I did the donut thing. Yeah, Ponchki, baby, all the way. Fat Thursday, sacred tradition.
I had a donut.
I don't like the jam in the regular Ponchkis. You know, I find the jam a bit...
The rose petal jam?
Yeah, it's a bit nasty. I'd prefer just a regular strawberry jam, quite frankly.
Can I give you my controversial opinion on this?
Go ahead, John.
I got three controversial opinions. Number one...
Oh, you have a lot more than that, my friend.
Number one, Star Wars, easily the most overrated movie franchise ever. Number two, Robin Williams, not that funny. And three, 95% of all Ponchki taste exactly the same.
They do. But you know what the true joy of Fat Thursday is, John?
Are you going to let my controversial opinion fly past? You're not going. 95% of all Ponchki tastes exactly the same. It's like salt. Wherever you go, whatever store you go to, it tastes the same.
Well, I believe you.
Thank you, Josh.
You're missing the whole point of the holiday. The whole point of Fat Thursday is moaning about Fat Thursday. Wherever you go, in any office, you're handed, say, free donuts, and then the discussion starts. Oh, these donuts are stale. They were made the last day. There's a big scam on Fat Thursday. The bakeries buy in lots of boxes of donuts.
Yeah, like
and they don't even have different flavours.
Imported from China or something.
Then we're on to price gouging. They put the price up on Fat Thursday. They're taking away the joy of the whole thing. And then discussion always melts straight into where you can get the real Ponchkis.
Yeah, and that's the
and there's always
discussion.
one or two little bakeries. Then an argument starts
like
about what the best bakery
people
is.
standing outside in the queue.
Yeah,
I think those people are insane.
I mean,
what are you doing? Go to Tesco, get the exact same one. You can get as many as you want.
So they can be in work the next day. When this discussion comes up, they can go, but I went and got the real Ponchki.
Yeah, the real one, not those crap ones you guys ate.
I had to hear it all day in work, and then I got home. I got the same speech the second I got through the door and asked my wife about Fat Thursday. It's just a sacred Polish tradition.
Well, anyway, let's get on with the news. Welcome back, everybody. This is the KrakCast News, by the way. It's not a show about Ponchki, at least not yet.
You're always talking about donuts. You brought up Krispy Kremes on this show.
He's absolutely right.
On the Krispy Kreme, no, not the on the,
Change his
on
name
the
to
subject
Duncan,
of food, rather.
Krispy Kreme should have their own public holiday.
There's our first news story this week. I'll just read the first sentence of this news story. Listen to this. Krakow has been named European Capital of Gastronomic Culture 2019.
We shouldn't laugh.
No. Actually, there's plenty of mirth within this one, but I actually got to the bottom of the article. I don't know if you guys did. And what I noticed...
Was that a little dig at us there, Joe?
It was.
Well, only because this wasn't discussed in the pre-show warm-up in the green room.
You're right. I actually didn't read all that article. I was laughing too hard at its implications.
But the implication would be from the headline that this is an award that is an annual award that goes to somewhere as like leading the world of gastronomical excellence or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, it turns out that this is the inaugural year. This is the first time that it's been awarded to anyone anywhere. And the two kind of front runners were Lisbon and Krakow. And sadly, Lisbon just couldn't quite make the cut.
I've been to Lisbon. It should have made the cut.
I find it interesting it says that Krakow is not a capital, but the capital, because, what's it called? The European City of Culture. Every year there's like 15 of those, right?
Some dubious cities have held that honor as well.
There's only one. Krakow is the single gastronomic capital this year. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Also, it's also in the article, which I did read, by the way, Josh. Not to the very end, but anyway, it says that part of the reason Krakow was chosen was because of the number of Michelin recommendations. Now, there's a
single Michelin-starred restaurant.
That's a good
very
weasel
important distinction between Michelin recommendations and Michelin stars. Krakow does not have a single Michelin star. It does have a number, 26 Michelin recommendations. I think the bar is pretty low for recommendations. When it comes to stars, obviously right, London, Paris, Rome, I'm sure, Berlin, etc. have Michelin stars.
I think Beijing is leading the pack now for Michelin stars.
Let's generally speaking, though, maybe not the super elite level of 3-star Michelin restaurants, but Food options in Krakow generally pretty good, or is
Great.
this-
I mean, there's a good affordable dining scene in Krakow. There's some very good restaurants that serve very good produce at a good price. You can
And
go
diversity as well these days.
There is. It's getting better all the time, but to put it up against the real big boys of Europe, I find a little laughable still.
the
at
restaurant
this
scene
stage.
here is very much driven by the tourist trade, which means it's driven by a clientele who's going to dine once and probably never come back. And that usually has a diminishing effect on the quality of things. I'm not saying everything is just, kebabs and shawarma and stuff like that. But there are some nice restaurants. The decor is quite nice. The menus are quite nice. How much are you going to spend on an expensive meal here for 2 people? 200?
Yeah.
250 with drinks?
Yeah.
Okay, let's not kid ourselves that 60 euros puts you in the elite level of restaurant. Come on, elite restaurants are going to cost money. More than 60 euros for 2 people.
Yeah, a starter will cost you €60.
I imagine they're not too happy about this up in Warsaw, where it's very much the view that the high-end dining scene is a lot better than it would be in Krakow.
I think it is, based on what I know. Warsaw is
I'm
miles
going
ahead of Krakow.
anecdotally here. It's not like I've tested every fine dining establishment in both cities, but anecdotally, from
That's where
people
the money
who
is.
have a few quid, that's
where
what
the
I
restaurants
hear.
are. Doesn't that make sense? That's where the money is, so that's where the fine restaurants would be.
Well, there's plenty of money in Krakow, and the fine dining scene is getting better. They feature a couple of chefs, in fairness, in the article who sound like good guys who are doing a great job, and I'm not trying to be disdainful. I just find it well laughable.
Anybody want to throw out a favorite
Dublin would
restaurant here?
beat Krakow hands
Favorite
down,
restaurant in
and
Krakow?
and London, both of our hometown cities.
I think that what's that one? Something Climate on just down the road from where you used to live. That's
Something Climate?
Southern Climate, I think.
Southern Climate?
Yeah.
Dave, favorite restaurant in Krakow? Do you have one?
Geez, not especially. I used to go to Edo a lot. Good Asian food.
A lot of good Asian fusion stuff going on now as well. What do you think about these restaurants? What's that one called? It's called Wierzynek. Yeah, in the Rynek.
Yeah.
It's all right.
They coast on this reputation that they got, a century ago. It's so, it's famous, it's classic, it's quintessentially Krakow, so you have to go, and it's all right?
The food is grand. Yeah. The service is excellent. It's like one of those really.
View from the window is good.
It's silver service.
It's silver service, the old
You
cupboard.
go for the
dishes
experience.
and-
It's actually well worth a dinner if you're.
Well, anyway, Gastronomic Capital of Europe 2019. Sounds impressive, though. Sounds very impressive. Moving on, but staying here in Krakow, this is something we talked about a month or so ago. The green zone implemented in Kazimierz. If you don't remember, it's in the test phase now. It's supposed to be implemented on a permanent basis later. It restricts car traffic in Kazimierz to electric vehicles, I think hybrid vehicles as well, and residents and taxis. It's a pretty long list of exemptions, actually, if people can still drive through Kazimierz. It came into effect last week, and apparently a very important sector of the community there in Kazimierz was not consulted on this, or at least their voice was not heard to the extent they wanted it to be heard. That was the business owners. They staged a one-day strike in protests to the proposal to restrict this car traffic in Kazimierz. Dave, doesn't it make sense that the people who try to make money in Kazimierz don't like access being restricted?
Well, look, anytime in a city you try and restrict cars into a place with businesses, the business owners protest. That's why probably they weren't consulted, because everybody knew exactly what they were going to say in the first place. I have run a bar in Krakow on just off the main square, which is also totally restricted. And it's a pain in the arse, dragging your deliveries around literally by hand for 200 metres. I sympathise, but at the same time, you can't tell me that pedestrianising the car park on the Maui Rynek wasn't a good idea. Platschapansky, taking the cars out of the old town, was a massive success, even though it meant, a little more arm workouts for Dave lifting keg around the corner. So,
I still think the people in Kazimierz, like the bars, for example, they can still get their deliveries, I guess, right? I mean,
at certain times, yeah, they can come up. I'm sure they're fine.
but in terms of hurting their business, when you think about it, Kazimierz, I don't know how dependent they are on people who drive to Kazimierz to buy something. It's all foot
skeptical,
traffic, isn't it?
I'm skeptical.
Well, I tell you this, actually.
I think it's just a pain in their arse. They used to be able to drive up to the building. Now they can't. That's what.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of cafes that I regularly go to, like in the daytime or the afternoon or whatever, and they're, like regular faces, people that you see there all the time. Not people I know, but you know them by sight, and they all kind of pitch up by car. And, very often they'll spend their time like with half an eye out the window looking for a traffic warden because they haven't bought a ticket either. Well, they've all disappeared. Now, it may be that they're kind of regular customers that they know spin a coffee out for an hour and a half, but they're not coming along anymore. And they're going to places, probably in Podgorze where they can park. I don't know.
Prediction time in 6 months. Is this green zone thing going to be a permanent thing, or is it going to be gone?
City councils aren't known for backing down on this type of thing. I would imagine it's here to say.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. So, again, the exemptions, it's funny. You can't drive there unless you have an electric car. Oh, and unless you have a hybrid car. Oh, and unless you're in a taxi. Oh, and unless you're making a delivery. Oh, and unless you live there. So by the time all the exemptions get counted in,
there isn't really anybody left.
The traffic flow is basically the same as it was before.
I suppose I'd have much more sympathy if it was like a small town. It's just that it is right in the centre of the city, and it is a very pedestrianised area anyway, if you know what I mean. So I'm sceptical that it's really hurting their business, although the scenario Josh laid out, I have sympathy for those people that like to drive in and have a beer while not paying for their parking. Or a coffee, sorry.
Yeah, coffee.
Let's turn to two big national stories this week. The first of them is on the subject of 500 Plus, which we've talked about before on the show. 500 Plus, if you don't remember, is a government program started, 2 years ago now, that pays people for having children, 500 zlotys a month, hence the name 500 Plus. And it starts with your second child. So if you have one child, you get nothing. 2 children, you get 500 a month. 3 children, you get 1,000 a month, and so on and so on. Well, at the party convention last week, Law and Justice Party, Peace, proposed that they change the law to have it include the first child. So you get paid from your first child, right? And since they run the government, there's every reason to believe that they will make this the law before the general elections in October. Dave, Josh, is this a naked attempt to buy more votes or to keep the votes they have?
I can't believe I didn't see this coming. This is a slam dunk election winner is what it is. They held back that last kid because they knew they'd need something extra in 3 or 4 years' time.
Well
and here
played,
it is.
Peace. Well played.
Yeah. I mean, the question is, of course, is if the public budget or the balance of payments or whatever is can afford it. If it's affordable, then it's a no-brainer really. Because
Josh, your quaint ideas about affording things when it comes to government spending.
They pretty much soaked up the cost of the last round by just an expanding exchequer and a booming economy, and there is
5.1% growth, isn't it?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It really is. And the debt to GDP ratio in Poland is only 50%, which is way lower than most countries in the EU. It's one of the few EU countries that still has an interest rate they can actually play with. I think it's around 2.5. So they're in a very healthy position to do this. Actually, if you take the politics out of it and just look at it from a can they afford it point of view, that's why Morawiecki, the banker, the reliable financial hands, it all looks credible. The markets didn't react at all to this news. They don't think it's unsustainable. So
bribe Polish citizens to have Polish children.
Every person now, even liberals who have one kid, are going to pretend they're not going to vote for peace, and they're just going to do it to get that extra 500 zloty, because 500 zloty is 500 zloty.
I think we talked about this before months ago when we were talking about 500 Plus, that it's the center right stealing the thunder of the center left by taking the kind of their core platform, this increased social spending. And it's a winning combination. They're almost certainly going to win the general elections in October. Can you just imagine that the PO people right now sitting in their offices crying, just kind of staring at the wall?
They need a big scandal. They need something.
They need a scandal. They do.
They need one bad. And we're going to cover the emerging crisis of salaries and the national.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second. But I think you're right, Dave. I think even people who disagree politically, or maybe apolitical people, are going to vote strictly for practical reasons.
Absolutely. People vote with their wallets. They always have done. Tax changes are always a massive incentive for voters in general elections. That's the great myth. We think it's all about these grand ideals, but people just want to know, what am I getting?
So the way things look now, 500 Plus is going to come into it. We don't know when it's going to take effect, but it's almost certainly going to be voted into law before the October elections. And from child number 1, you get your 500 zloty. So 2 kids will get you 1,000. Should think about just quitting work and sitting at home and collecting the money, Dave?
Well, you were the one that said no one would ever do that, John, and I agree. So I agree with your previous points.
Other big story this week in national news comes from the central bank. Interesting information coming out about how much money people are getting paid there. And not only how much money they're getting paid, but are they qualified? And who are these people? First of all, guys, it's no secret that governments all over the world use government agencies, central banks, United Nations delegations, embassies to kind of, reward their friends and give stupid brothers-in-law a job and things like that, right? Well, I think we all accept that, but this week it kind of pushed the limits of our tolerance of this kind of thing. The central bank governor, what's his name? Glapinski?
Mm-hmm.
Is that his name?
Yeah.
Turns out he's got two assistants, let's say. Two, young, reasonably attractive assistants, Ms. Martyna Wojciechowska and Kamila Sukienek. And it turns out that they're both earning 40-something thousand zlotys a month.
Nice.
40-something thousand zlotys. Now, Glapinski, he's the boss. He's earning 65. So his assistants are earning like 75% of what he's earning. Just based on that information alone, isn't there reason to be a little bit curious about what the hell is going on here?
Well, I see that he's already out on the offensive trying to play the how dare you sexists accuse these ladies of not being worth their enormous salaries. But there's also a question raised in the article that you sent me about one of the ladies being placed on a board that very much you would need a very expert financial background to sit on, and that's the question. That's why I don't have all the facts on what is their educational background. Why
you were just admiring her excellent financial background.
Well,
she
no,
was
I just
sitting on.
The central bank isn't a place for cronyism. I mean, it's supposed to be completely independent. It's not actually. I totally disagree with you. It's not a place where you put your buddies.
Well, no, wait a second. Not
is qualified
not in
for his role.
decision-making capacity, but certainly in an administrative kind of assistant, some kind of vague terms about, we're not really sure what they do, but we need them. Not in a number crunching.
All I can do is think is if this happened in Ireland and it came out that aides that weren't directly really in important positions were getting paid this type of money, it could be a scandal there as well, even with our vastly huger salaries.
Well, he's coming out swinging, as you say. He's defending it, and I think he's also probably calling in some favors from political allies because at least one of these women, maybe both of them, are kind of longtime operatives in peace. So it looks like it could be, maybe they got these jobs as a favor to somebody else, and now that somebody else is probably getting phone calls with requests to kind of help with advice or something to make the media storm go away. And so I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, Josh.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry. I thought you looked like you were going to say something. So.
No. I mean, I was thinking you aren't really summing that up kind of about as admirably as I would attempt to myself. So anything I say is utterly superfluous.
Well, we're getting a lot of information in the media about salaries generally, because I guess it's all freely available public information since they're public employees, and it looks like the average salary at the central bank is pretty healthy.
We should know as well, Kaczynski's trying to get out in front of this desperately at the moment because him and Glapinski go back a long way. Of course, Glapinski's eminently qualified for his role. He's an economist of long held standing. But, there is a question here of why are they panicking then? Why is it was Kaczynski that called for them to release the salaries publicly. There seems to be an element of somebody's getting pushed under a bus pretty quickly here because we've got an election coming up this year, wouldn't you say?
Just to play devil's advocate, though. Yeah, you're right. But just to play devil's advocate, okay, these are eye-opening salaries, 40, 45,000 a month. Okay, we're not sure what the hell they're doing for this money. But in this day and age, with wage levels where they are, for that kind of high-level managerial talent, you could make the argument that this is what you have to pay to get these people to work in the national bank instead of working at some telecoms company or insurance company, private company in Warsaw. This is what people make these days.
Well, what I'd like to do is follow this up next week because as I was trying to say earlier, I don't really have a clear picture of the full background of the two ladies in question who are the center of this story. Let's be real about this. This is why it's such a, that's why it did blow up. That's why Glapinski is trying to get out on the front foot ahead of this, as he claims it's, they're being judged on their appearance. Okay. So that's fine, but that's an incredibly high salary for that position. So let's have a good hard look over the week and we'll find out exactly what their qualifications are to be in such a position, and then we'll update next week. What do you think, John?
I think so too.
Tour of media analysis.
Again, just to be fair, I think if you took a hard look at the salaries in TVP, if you took a hard look at the salaries in some of these government-owned mining companies, take a hard look at the salaries at the delegation that goes to the European Union, you're always going to find people who are grossly overpaid, but they know the right people. They're being rewarded for political help. It's just kind of, backroom deals. This is how, and it's not just Poland. Every country does this. Right?
True, but in Ireland anyway, the central bank is certainly seen as something you wouldn't, you'd be very careful with. The optics on it are very important because the markets move based on scandals such as this, although they didn't in this case.
Speaking of the political scene,
should be noted.
Speaking of the political scene, last week we did a special on the new party Wiosna. We talked about Robert Biedron and the impact that the new party is going to make on the kind of the center-left part of the political spectrum. More news for new parties. Just what Poland needs, another political party, right? This one's called Polska Fairplay. Polska Fairplay. Now, let's be honest right from the beginning. They're not going to make some huge earthquake on the political scene. Don't look for them to take the prime ministership anytime soon. But they're running on an interesting party based on the point of view of entrepreneurs and business people. Josh, what's their angle for this whole new party?
Well, firstly, I think, of course, the idea Polska Fairplay is obviously a better name for a party than Polska dodgy dealings or anything like that. The platform seems to be, and I have to say I'm not entirely persuaded by this, that corporate income tax be replaced by a turnover tax, which I think can very much assist small businesses that have kind of lots of things that they can offset against their tax liabilities, but is not such a good thing for bigger businesses because if you're not actually profitable, then you still have to pay tax, despite the fact it then becomes a kind of a burden on you, even though you might not be profitable, and that may mean that you are now unable to continue in business.
I just kind of see this as further fragmenting the already fragmented kind of libertarian free market Corvin-Mikke kind of. I don't see this going anywhere.
It's a perennial problem with kind of like libertarian movements of all stripes around the world. Really, is that by definition you can't really agree to have a sort of a collective banner to operate under. So there's always someone else's form of libertarianism is always slightly more enlightened or better for people than anybody else's, and so you get this ridiculous fragmentation.
So the voting ballot, the list of parties on the next ballot in the next elections just got longer, and who knows if we might not see another name or two or three before October. And so, on the one hand, it's a sign of like dynamism and life that new parties form, and people believe that the current system is not catering to their needs and interests. Okay, that's fine. It's a sign of vitality. But at the same time, you start dividing and further subdividing. It just makes it more difficult for anything to get done, and makes it more difficult for anyone to get that 5% threshold they need for the parliament or forming coalitions. Everything is just harder to make progress. Does that make sense?
It's cyclical though. They're all gearing up for the next general. So you don't see this every year. It's just they're all getting ready to go, Johnny.
Well, speaking of go, let's talk about flying away.
Oh
no, bad.
Shocking.
I took a shot. It didn't work. Okay,
it was fine. A departure from your normal high quality.
I would like to say the turnover tax is interesting. It's one of those ideas that really kind of won't go away.
It's a libertarian fantasy land. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, so Ireland used to have one before we joined.
Anyway, Polish Airlines, they announced this week in honor of Poland's 100th year of independence that they're going to show on their flights. Obviously, they're going to show 100 Polish films. What's our jumping off point for the conversation of Polish films on Polish planes?
Is that kind of all 100 films in one flight?
Depends on where you're going, I guess.
So if you're an American tourist, you can only watch a classic Polish movie now. Is this what you're telling me?
I don't know if it's like going to be one of your options or like the whole movie, the whole plane has
like
to
that
watch.
Would be it.
Is it going to be with like an American lector just to give it back to them good and hard?
Chuck Norris or something. That'd be deadly.
No, I don't think any of the three of us are ready to make a list of 100 Polish movies. Much less.
Goddamn right about that, John. Moving on swiftly.
100 best Polish movies. But do you think that maybe the recent success of movies like Cold War and what was the one? Ida and others. Do you think maybe that is giving the lot people the impression that Polish films have an international profile that maybe they don't really have?
Well, look, the Irish are masters at banging on about the things that make us uniquely Irish. So why wouldn't the Poles go on about their proud history of producing producing superstar filmmakers.
No, I get that. I'm just thinking about who's sitting on the plane. If it's overwhelmingly a Polish clientele, okay, absolutely no problem. But if you have a more of an international clientele, I think a lot of them might be confused.
I'm sure you can still watch Rush Hour 2 or whatever, man. You know, I'm sure
Police
there's still
Academy
a few
6,
options.
my favorite.
What's the story with Police Academy? We're back on Police Academy again.
No, it's the great
It's
default
the
for
worst
bad
movie
titles.
franchise of all time.
Better than Star
Apart from
Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
Josh, you take your seat on
a lot
the
of Star
long
Wars
flight,
bashing
and you
here.
see that all you've got to choose from is this or that Polish movie. What do you think?
I'm okay with that, as long as it's not one I've seen before and I know isn't any good.
I don't know.
It's those little screens anyway. You can't really enjoy it.
Some of the comedy films,
I
are,
prefer to
are funny.
read on a flight myself, Sean.
It's the kind of the grim kind
Sip
of,
red wine.
Life is
Except
brutal
for
and then you
those
die.
Asian long haul flights, I think 90% of lot flights are like 2 hours or less, aren't they? So does it really matter what movie's playing?
King Size. That's a funny film.
I read something that the Polish military is upgrading to American fighter jets soon, John. Does that make you proud? Getting rid of the old Russian gear.
Does it make me proud that
These make the most awesome fighter jets in the world.
I don't know who makes the best fighter jets. Doesn't
I think
Poland
the French
already
do
use?
that.
Yeah, the French, but don't they already use the F-16s? I think.
Well, they're buying a load of those. That's
It's just subsidy for the McDonnell Douglas and Boeings of the world, essentially. So, I mean, you think they're going to see any action? The Polish fighters are going to see any action?
No, but I like to think they'll be doing plenty of patrolling with reliable systems.
Didn't we start out by talking about movies on lot flights?
Yeah.
I couldn't see that where that was going though. Really, I'm trying to move things along here, John.
Yeah, not a lot of controversy there, but it's interesting.
It's a true story, by the way. They are considering a very
When was
large
the last
order.
time you took a lot flight? I haven't been.
I've never been on a lot flight ever.
I flew lots to London a couple of years ago, a last minute booking, and I got a propeller plane from Krakow to Warsaw, and then a jet from Warsaw to London Heathrow, which is the only time I've ever come into Heathrow from Poland.
I'm always on Lufthansa.
And I got some peanuts and a glass of water on the flight.
Oh, I think. Didn't they get rid of peanuts because of allergies or something like that? The airline still.
You're right. Yeah,
I think it's
I
pretzels.
lied. They were not peanuts. They were some kind of savoury, crunchy snack.
Yeah,
of a
because you can kill
non-peanut
everybody with
variety,
peanuts these days. Or
I
something.
flew on Aeroflot once. Is that cool?
Really? Where did you go on Aeroflot?
Thailand with my missus.
Is it like $99 or something? Or?
It was very cheap. I can't remember.
I hope so.
It was significantly less expensive than the
Was
other
it through
options.
Moscow? Maybe.
Yeah, through Moscow.
Were you standing or did you have a seat?
Do you know what, man? I was a bit, nervous, but it was absolutely fine. Like, it was just like any other airport.
I'd be curious to know. I don't have any stats.
Brass
handy,
band
but
music over the intercom.
We can check
Apparently,
it.
they have the number
But
one
I think-
safety record in the region, Josh.
I think out of the Krakow airport, I'll bet you
The devil
Lot-
doesn't shoot down his own.
I'll bet you Lot is third or fourth at best in terms of number of flights out. I think Ryanair rules the Krakow airport. Lufthansa's probably number two. Probably another. Doesn't Wizz Air, was it some other budget airline started out of Krakow? I don't think Lot is a big deal here in Krakow.
No, well, I've never flown Lot, as I said. I fly Ryanair,
I
baby.
think in Warsaw.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last flight.
Does
I
Lot
think
even
there was
fly
a
to Ireland
Ryanair.
now? Does Lot fly to Dublin?
Maybe it does, but I can't imagine it's cheaper than Ryanair.
Well, I've got this link from you, Dave. Something about Patek-Philippe watches. I didn't really understand what the point is. What's the deal?
Well, I just thought, I've lived here for a long time and I never had any idea that the Patek in Patek-Philippe is a Polish guy. I just thought that was worth mentioning. So the other people out there who didn't know that can bring that up down the pub and go.
What, was it in the news? There was some kind of...
They make the best watches ever, right? I don't know anything about watches, but I know that the most expensive watch ever sold was a Patek-Philippe.
They are kind of... Josh, you mind, how much am I going to pay for a decent Patek-Philippe watch?
Well, 24 million was the most expensitive watch ever sold.
Slightly,
went for. So yeah, a bit less than that.
bit less
Yeah.
from the back of the catalogue.
Well, you're probably talking like, within an order of magnitude, like 10 Gs and upwards.
I bought a lovely Lacoste watch for 400 zlotys, and guess what? Broke after 6 months. They do know what they do, and them Swiss boys.
There you go. So Patek was Polish, and I guess Philippe is like French-Swiss or something?
Probably, yeah. It has that kind of
does
French-Swiss
sound-
kind of sound
yeah,
to it.
it does.
Just thought it was worth mentioning, all right? The disdain dripping from your voice points it clear that you're not that interested. Did you know already?
He doesn't wear a watch.
I had heard of... I haven't worn a watch in ages, but I'd heard of that before. I think in my pub quiz days, I'd come across the fact that Patek was Polish.
It's yet another example.
I'm trying to think. Aren't there some other inventors, scientists that most people don't know were Polish? I know Marie Curie is probably the correct example. But if you live in Poland, everybody in Poland knows that. But people outside of Poland also
you don't even like
Copernicus.
You don't even like to break it to Polish people that in the British and Irish educational systems, it's not exactly clarified. There's a lot of talk of Paris and Frenchness, and one does tend to think she's French from where we come from, which is scandalous, absolutely scandalous.
We'll put Patek in that group with Marie Curie.
No, I don't think we're going with the only person to have ever won a Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific disciplines up against a watchmaker.
Look at Dave showing off here.
It's impressive stuff.
Somebody check Wikipedia.
No, I didn't. It's just a very memorable statistic.
Does that bring us to the end of the road for this particular edition of the news?
Was there anything?
I think that's pretty much
What a weird way to end the news.
Yeah, I just kind of
on that bombshell.
staggering to the finish line here.
Charismatic closing link. there
Guys,
from
don't forget
John
to visit our
Atkins.
sponsors, Big Door 24, all things related to real estate, buying, selling, renting, etc. bigdoor24.pl/KrakCast for a special cashback offer. Thanks for listening. Make sure you share on Facebook, tell your friends, just do whatever you have to do to get people to listen to the KrakCast, please. And send us some. Dave, you have any requests for people on social media? You want people to write to you, say hello to you? Emails?
No.
Checks.
Messages?
I'll reach out to you by podcast.
That's it for now. See you next time on the KrakCast.